So think about UN peacekeepers. They're sent to some of the most fragile places on Earth with a really noble mission, right? To protect civilians and to keep the peace. But there's this deeply troubling pattern that's emerged, one where the very people sent to protect are being accused of exploitation. We really need to dig into how and why this is happening.
And that really brings us to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? What happens when the protectors become the perpetrators? When the individuals we send to bring stability actually end up causing more harm? While that's not just a problem, it's a profound ethical crisis that completely undermines the whole point of peacekeeping.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the failure, we first have to understand the ideal. The entire idea of UN peacekeeping is built on a promise, a fundamental promise to protect the most vulnerable people. So, let's take a look at what that promise looks like on paper.
The whole ethical foundation really boils down to three core principles. First, impartiality. You don't take sides. Second, consent of the parties involved in the conflict. And third, and this is absolutely crucial for our conversation today, the non-negotiable duty to protect civilians. This is the gold standard they're all supposed to live up to.
And over the decades, the UN has built what really looks like a pretty solid framework to back this promise up. It all started with the original charter back in 1945. Then came specific resolutions focusing on women, peace, and security. In 2003, they established a zero-tolerance policy, and more recently, a trust fund for victims. So, on paper, all the rules are there.
But, and this is a huge but, this is where the official story and the grim reality on the ground just completely split apart. To see what I mean, we're going to zoom in on one of the UN's largest missions, the one in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as a case study of this broken promise.
Take a look at this number, 272. That's the number of official allegations of sexual exploitation made against military personnel in the UN's MONUSCO mission. And let's be real, we all know that for every reported case, there are many, many more that never see the light of day.
And then you've got this number, 190. That's how many paternity claims have been filed against peacekeepers in that very same mission. We're talking about women and children left behind with absolutely no support and no path to justice. These aren't just statistics, right? They represent real people whose lives have been completely shattered.
And make no mistake, this is not just an issue in one mission. It's a systemic, recurring pattern. We've seen it in Haiti, where peacekeepers fathered hundreds of children and then just left them in poverty. In South Sudan, with horrific accusations of child rape. And in the Central African Republic, where abuse is believed to be widespread, but victims are often too terrified to speak out. The problem is truly global.
So you have to ask, what is driving all of this? I mean, beyond just individual misconduct, there's a much deeper socioeconomic force at play here. It's a concept that local leaders have actually given a name to, cash violence.
Cash violence. It's a powerful and chillingly accurate term for what happens when the massive economic gap between well-paid peacekeepers and the local population becomes a weapon. It's a tool of exploitation that just rips communities apart, turning relationships into transactions and echoing a really dark, almost colonial dynamic.
And just listen to this quote from a community leader in the DRC. It says everything. He says, "Our women used to love us naturally, but the peacekeepers introduced cash violence, thereby destroying many marital homes." This isn't just about individual choices. It's about the destruction of the entire social fabric, the breakdown of families. You can feel the resentment and the pain.
Which brings us to a huge, huge piece of this puzzle, accountability. Or, more accurately, the stunning lack of it. Why is it so incredibly hard for victims to get any justice at all? Well, the system itself creates what you could basically call an accountability black hole.
The barriers are just immense. First, you have this messy dual responsibility, where it's split between the UN and the soldier's home country. In theory, that respects national sovereignty, but in practice, it's a jurisdictional nightmare, where cases just fall through the cracks. Then you have peacekeepers who can easily hide their true identities. Victims live in constant fear of retaliation, and even if a child is born from this, there's often no clear path to getting any kind of support. Justice feels, well, it feels impossible.
So it's pretty clear that small, piecemeal fixes are not going to cut it. What's needed is a fundamental transformation of the entire system. So let's talk about what real systemic reform would actually have to look like. Here's the most crucial point. The entire model needs to flip.
For way too long, the focus has been security-centric, all about troop movements, military objectives, that kind of thing. The argument is that it absolutely must become victim-centered, placing the safety, the rights, and the dignity of the local population at the absolute core of every single operation.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, step one has to be creating clear, transnational accountability that you can't just dodge by hopping on a plane and crossing a border. That has to be paired with real, meaningful, accessible support for victims and their children. From there, you need deterrents that are actually strong enough to change behavior, and all of this has to be built on a foundation of deeper professionalization of the forces themselves.
Which leaves us with this final, massive question. This isn't just about punishing a few bad actors. It's about fundamentally reshaping one of the world's most important institutions to make sure its promise to protect is a promise that is never, ever broken again. What's it going to take to finally make that promise a reality?